Let's talk about selling to higher net worth individuals, business owners, more sophisticated buyers, people like that, because it is a little different. And in some cases, depending on the offer, it can be a lot different. With the first point being, in most cases, it's a more logistical sale. One mistake I see a lot of sales reps running into is usually because of how they're taught, they're always trying to force the emotional conversation, when in almost all cases, the emotional conversation needs to be warranted, it needs to be earned. It's just a lot easier earned if you're selling a B2C relationship, dating offer, fitness offer, than it is if you're selling, a B2B marketing, scale your business type offer where you're speaking to maybe multi 7-figure business owners and stuff like that. The emotional side isn't as prevalent unless you know how to pull it out, but that's a whole nother conversation. Overall, even when it does get there on those types of calls, it's still a much more logistical sale than those other types of offers where you're not speaking to those type of people. So don't try to force the emotional conversation. Don't just jump in awkwardly saying, how does that make you feel? And all this other stuff when the person is just trying to talk about scaling their business further. Don't force it. Don't force it. Secondly, I'll say is a lot of high net worth individuals are looking to not just speak to a sales rep that knows all the lines, that knows all the lingo. They're trying to speak to an advisor, someone with actual industry knowledge, someone that has an understanding of the problems they face and how to actually solve them so that they can get to the goals that they're trying to achieve. So you need to adopt that mentality of you're an advisor, you're not just a sales guy that knows the pitch and knows how to handle some objections and knows the most common discovery questions. Because as soon as you jump into that, one size fits all script that a lot of people are taught, they're going to sniff it out and trust is going to be burned right then and there. And they're not going to see you as that advisor that can actually help them overcome their problems, right? So you want them to see you in that light. You want them to see you as the doctor that's diagnosing and has the authority to actually provide a solution. You're not just some guy that got hired not for their industry knowledge, but because they went through a closing program, right? That's going to make a huge difference on these calls. The calls are usually much shorter. Discovery is usually shorter. You don't necessarily have to do 45-minute, hour-long discoveries. Obviously, the pitch and maybe handling some concerns and navigating some objections will take some time. But typically, I've seen these, instead of doing like a 45-minute discovery, you can crank it out in 25-30 minutes because, again, the conversation is just more pointed. It's more logical. A lot of times they're coming in knowing exactly what they want. A lot of times they're coming in knowing exactly what the bottlenecks are in whatever it is that you guys are speaking about. Therefore, you don't have to probe as much. You don't have to re-ask the same question in multiple different ways to finally get the answer. You don't have to pry a lot of times because they know and they're coming in to get help with this thing. And they're like, hey, this is what I'm facing. This is what the problem is. Can you help me? And then when it comes to just the pitch, when it comes to speaking about the desired outcomes, goals, all those things, you'll notice the higher net worth individual you go, or the bigger the company you speak to, the longer term focus there is when it comes to outcomes, right? You might be speaking to like a beginner business owner who they're talking about getting an ROI. They're talking about getting results within 30 days. They're like, what am I going to see week 1 with you? Versus the bigger the business, usually the longer time horizon they're looking at. It'll go from 30 days to 60 to 90 days to 120 to 6 months to a year to 5 years to 10 years. The further you go, usually massive businesses are thinking in decades, not quarters. So you want to make sure that you're having that long-term conversation. You're focused on long-term outcomes. You're focused on how this is going to not just solve a problem, but set them on a new trajectory, right? The value you're bringing is a complete transformation on the trajectory that their business is heading in, or whatever it is you're selling to them, whatever transformation you're selling to them. So lots of other things I could talk about here, but those are just a few tips. I don't want to make this video too long. Those are a few tips about selling to high net worth individuals. It's different. It can be very different, and it gets even more different the higher up the ladder you go. The bigger the business, the bigger the net worth person, the more sophisticated the buyer in that niche. It can change. So just don't treat all of them the same. Identify where you're at, be an industry expert, have deep knowledge and understanding around the problem. I get you should do that no matter who you're speaking to, but it's even more important as you go higher up. I'll leave it there. Hopefully you learned something. See you in the next video.